Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. I'm happy to see so many of you today on this sunny, cold winter day in Wisconsin. I am thrilled to have our speaker here with us today. Katie Dahl is a wonderful singer, a songwriter. She'll be singing two of her original songs for us today, and a playwright extraordinaire. If you've been to Northern Lights Theater in the park, Katie has written some of their most beloved plays. So we welcome you heartily, Katie, and thank you so much for coming to speak with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Here we are in our circle again, a circle of vision, a circle of reflection. Our theme for the month of February is widening our circle. Our speakers this month are people that can help us to widen that circle, to open our minds a little more, to spread our arms a little wider, to be willing to listen to and hear another side. So I welcome all of you today.
We light this chalice as a symbol of our commitment to our fellowship and to each other. May our many sparks meet and merge in communion of heart and soul.
Love is the doctrine of this congregation. The quest for truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to share strength and fellowship, thus do we covenant. Our opening words today are "We Bid You Welcome" by Richard S. Gilbert.
We bid you welcome, who come with weary spirits, seeking rest, who come with troubles that are too much with you, who come hurt and afraid. We bid you welcome, who come with hope in your heart, who come with anticipation in your step, who come proud and joyous. We bid you welcome, who are seekers of a new faith, who come to probe and explore, who come to learn. We bid you welcome, who enter this space as a homecoming, who have found here room for your spirit, who find in this people a family. Whoever you are, whatever you are, wherever you are on your spiritual journey, we bid you all welcome.
Thank you, Dick. And we have the pleasure this morning of our opening hymn being sung by Katie. She has written this music, and it is a peek into what her presentation will be today, which is learning truths we already know and finding the courage to stand in them. This is "I Already Knew."
I'm learning what I already knew, that I don't get to choose when or why or how or who. Aspens quake and bodies break, I could too. I could too, I already knew. The in and out is all we get to keep. Nose to throat to lung to heart to blood to rosy cheek. Days go by in minutes, the hours last a week. The in and out pure. Not one of us is clean. Every one of us is pure. Everyone's a holy dream. A holy dream washed in the stream. There's never been a spring that didn't come. Nothing's ever new beneath the cold winter sun. Hammer, tree, and tap, that sap is gonna run. It's gonna run, and spring is gonna come. I'm learning what I already knew. That all the mighty millions are really just the fragile few. Empires shake and bodies break, and I love you. I love you. I already knew.
Thank you, Katie. That was beautiful. Our reading today is from the book Sources of Our Faith, and it's called Let Your Life Speak by Robert Lawrence Smith. Let your life speak. Have the patience to be silent and listen for truth. Then have the courage to have the best that is in you direct your actions. Recognize that your true identity is nothing more or less than the way in which you conduct your public and private affairs, the way in which, for good or ill, you let your life speak. So our presentation today from Katie, learning truths we already knew and finding the courage to stand in them. Thank you for joining us today, Katie, from Door County.
Well, my privilege, for sure. And my husband and 5-year-old son have just left the house, and my dog. So I believe that we will have a peaceful presentation. Fingers crossed. So last fall marked the 18-year anniversary of me coming out as bisexual to my mom. It's 2003, Thanksgiving morning to be exact. And my mom is not really the cooking type, so I wasn't interrupting like stuffing preparation. And she was very kind to me, but still there's something sort of je ne sais quoi about coming out right before a day of eating turkey with all your Baptist relatives, of whom I have many. So why did I choose that morning? Looking back, I didn't choose it really. I told my mom then because it had become too much work and felt too inauthentic and too painful not to tell her. And that's the same reason that I'm talking to you about it today. So let me take a step back. We've just gone through a period of isolation, right? Enforced privacy. And it's been a time of loss of loved ones and loss of community and routine and coping mechanisms and dinner in restaurants and worry-free coughing and glasses that don't fog up when you enter a room, right? Your mask makes your glasses fog up, mine at least. It's been 18 months of massive isolation and loss, and it's not over yet. Every day takes a certain amount of fortitude just to get through. But the pandemic has also brought us gifts. And what I want to talk about today is the ways in which this time, for all of its loss and pain and uncertainty, has also brought clarity. Times of upheaval unearth truths in us, and sometimes they raise into greater consciousness things that we already knew. And I want to talk about the gifts that those truths can be. And finally, I want to talk about whether we can return to the world being the same selves we were when we sort of left it. Spoiler alert, I don't think that we can. I think we've changed. And we've deepened into ourselves in ways that have changed us. I know I have changed. A lot of what we've learned are truths that we already knew, but have now come to know more deeply. Truths that we might have sat alone with for months now. And as we creep gradually back into public life, we're bumping up our need to integrate those truths into the selves that we present to the world. My therapist said to me last week that our lives are like two circles, our public personas and our private personas. Our public personas and our true selves. And that the greater the gap between those two circles, our true selves and our public personas, the greater the sense of dis-ease is felt by us and is felt by those around us. I think she's right. And of course, there are parts of ourselves that we do keep private and things that the world doesn't need to know, and that's great. But there are also different gaps that cause pain and dis-ease and prevent us from showing up fully in the world. So let's talk about those two circles. First, the circle of true self. For me, during this time of solitude, my true self has had time and space to etch itself more clearly into my consciousness. And I've become more conscious of parts of myself that for years have been obscured by A, my perceptions of public opinion, because before the pandemic I saw the public more often, and B, my own constant motion. Suddenly habits that had allowed me to avoid my feelings, like travel and gigs and visits with friends and having one too many beers at the bar during a Packer game, were erased. So things became clear to me that hadn't been clear before. So then what does that do to that second circle, the circle of the public self? For me, having a clearer definition of my private self meant that my public self, to which I've begun returning, of course, as the pandemic kind of sort of recedes, felt more distant from the truth. There's a greater sense of that gap between the circles, that dis-ease that my therapist was talking about. And that meant that for me, it was time to look for ways to bring those two circles closer together. In my own life, some of the things that have become clear to me during this time are really big, and some of them are really small. And most of them I really already knew on some level. For example, it's become clear to me that I find it really hard to play songs for people who aren't listening. I've known that on some level for years, but I didn't know how long it would have taken. I don't know how long it would have taken me to admit that to myself if there was no pandemic. Another example, it's become clear to me that I only want to wear comfortable pants from now on, forever else in life. As Anne Lamott says, don't wear pants that judge you. Life is too short. And without a pandemic, it might have been years before I realized how right she is, the importance of comfortable pants. So what I want to ask you today is, what has become so clear to you, so true, that you now need to live into it publicly? Is there anything like that in your life? For me, the biggest truth I already knew, which I now need to live into publicly, is the fact of my bisexuality, which I sometimes refer to as being bi or being queer. I wrestled as I wrote this talk with the question of whether my own experience of queerness might be too specific to resonate with other people, no matter what their or your journeys have been like. But I'm trusting a lesson that I've learned from songwriting, which is that universal truths live in really specific details. So I'm going to tell you a little bit today about my journey in hopes that some of it might resonate for some of you and help you live into questions of authenticity and honesty in your own life. So I am bisexual. That means I'm attracted to both men and women. I've dated both men and women. Since 2008, I've been with a man, my husband, Rich. We got married 7 years ago. And I just want to pause here and say that living in a heterosexual marriage affords me privilege and safety that a lot of other queer people lack, right? I generally pass as straight, even if I'm really trying not to. So even now, at a time when we're more open to non-straight sexualities than any other time that we have been in history, we still live in a really heteronormative world, right? Homophobia is pervasive, heterosexual privilege is everywhere, so I just want to acknowledge that I live in that world of privilege via my marriage to a man. I first began to realize that I was not straight my freshman year of college at an a cappella concert where my fellow Carleton College student Emily Fisher was singing. And I would like to posit that if you had heard Emily Fisher sing, you might have realized you were not straight too. It was something to behold. That was the first moment when I consciously understood that I was attracted to women, or really attracted to anybody. But looking back, there are plenty of experiences before that I now see through a lens of queerness, like meeting my middle school friend Hillary, a hockey player with curly hair and a stunning smile, who I wanted to be around all the time. Or like watching Kate Winslet in Titanic, or watching Kate Winslet in Sense and Sensibility, or really in anything. I did grow up in the golden age of Kate Winslet on screen. But I also grew up in the world of the conservative evangelical church, just as issues of gay rights were starting to seep into the public mainstream. Ellen DeGeneres came out on TV 10 days after I turned 11 in the spring of my 6th grade year, and my church definitely noticed. In middle school, sex was what we talked about in all youth group conversations. Mainly, how to make sure that you never, ever had sex. Maybe once you were married, maybe, but best never. And certainly only heterosexual sex for sure. I learned at Christian sleepaway camp that AIDS was the curse of the gays, as they referred to it. And in 7th grade, my youth leader said to our group, "I hate the gays. I can't stand them." I'm sure some of you have heard worse by far. And, of course, after he said that, he said, "But God says I have to love them, so I do." Which was, cold comfort. So all that had an impact on me. And so it was that it took 2 years after that Emily Fisher a cappella concert to really admit to myself that I was attracted to women. It was a fact. Compounding the situation was the fact that I learned I was also attracted to men. And we don't talk a lot about bisexuality in our culture. We like people to be all one way. It's easier to understand. Even the most accepting among us sometimes miss the possibility of the both and in a lot of different realms of our life. And particularly around bisexuality, we get pulled into harmful stereotypes. When I was 13, the Friends character, Phoebe Buffay, really summed it up when she sang, "Sometimes men love women, sometimes men love men. Then there are bisexuals, but some say they're just kidding themselves. La 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 la." This is like the Phoebe Buffay song that's probably the first time I heard about bisexuality, right in middle school. So after I realized that I liked women and I liked men, and I came out to myself as bisexual, I started to learn how to come out to other people. And that was really hard for me. I eventually started to come out on days other than Thanksgiving, though, which was a big step. After college, I started dating a woman, and that was my longest relationship before my marriage. And coming out became easier. Before I started dating her, I often wished something would force me to come out, so I didn't have to make the decision of whether to broach the topic or not. And I discovered that nothing forced the subject quite like having a girlfriend you had to introduce somebody to. Still, even then, people often saw only who I was dating at that time. My queerness was visible then, but bisexuality was not. If you're a monogamous person, bisexuality is never visible, right? Unless you make it so. So when my now husband Rich appeared in my life, I was surprised to find myself dating a man. I was even a little disappointed, because what comfort I had with my own queerness had been a long time coming, and it had been hard won. But I came to love Rich deeply and to trust him intimately. He knew from the beginning that I was queer. He wasn't threatened by it. He respected all of me. He is really great. And so after 5 years of dating, we decided to get married, create a life together. And that decision, too, was a long time coming and hard won. And my relationship with him and the security and joy it brings me, the way we are kind to one another, is one of the things I'm proudest of in my whole life. But in a lot of ways, my marriage pushed me back into the closet. People who I had known pre-Rich thought maybe I had finished my experimental queer phase and come out onto the other side, onto the solid ground of heterosexuality, right? And some people assumed that I wasn't actually queer in the first place. I had been making it up. People I met after I started being with Rich generally assumed I was straight, and I can't blame them, because as I said, if you're monogamous with a person of either gender, bisexuality is invisible until you make it visible. And I didn't know how to make it visible. So as I built a career in music, a career that included a certain amount of small town folk music scale celebrity, my public persona appeared straight by default. And that straight by default perception seeped into my personal life too. On some level, this never felt right to me. But for years, I tried and failed to come up with any good reason why the world should care. Why should it matter who I was attracted to, or who I dated in the past, if I had already chosen my life mate? When I did bring up bisexuality to friends or acquaintances in the year after I started dating Rich, some were understanding. A few of them were bi too. But I often encountered discomfort and sometimes outright resistance. Some people seemed to think it was exhibitionistic or an expression of dissatisfaction in my marriage. Some people, especially queer people, seemed to think that I had given up my place in the queer community and I didn't deserve to call myself part of that community anymore, which felt lonely. And some people equated bisexuality with promiscuity or non-monogamy, which is a common myth, but it's one that couldn't be further from my truth. So I grew quiet, and I let those two circles of my life, the private one and the public one, drift further and further apart, because that was the easier thing to do, and because I didn't feel that I had the right to bring them closer together. It turns out I'm not alone. According to a Gallup poll, a majority of adults in the LGBTQ community, 55%, identify as bisexual. But we are much less likely to be out. A study by the Pew Research Center found that only 28% of bisexual people said that they were out to most or all of the important people in their lives, compared with 77% of gay men and 71% of lesbians. This invisibility, or identity erasure, can take its toll. This summer, the New York Times quoted a 2017 review of 52 different studies, finding that bisexual people had higher rates of depression and anxiety than straight people, and higher or equivalent rates of depression and anxiety than other queer people. The Trevor Project found that bisexual high school students reported more feelings of sadness and hopelessness and more thoughts of suicide than those who identified as heterosexual or as gay. So this is exactly the kind of dis-ease my therapist was talking about. The dis-ease that happens when the circle of one's true self is different from the circle of one's public self. Like any good mask, the gap between my private and public circles shielded me, but it also made it harder to breathe. And like I mentioned before, even the best masks really tend to fog up your glasses. During that time, I tried to find ways to breathe, to see myself clearly and to be seen clearly. It's a deep human longing to be seen as you really are. I made a music video with a queer relationship in it, and I wondered if that would make anyone see the real me. I put a queer character in a play I wrote, and I wondered if that would make anyone see the real me. I wrote love songs with female pronouns, and I wondered if they would make anyone see the real me. I wanted so much to be seen. And then came the pandemic. Suddenly, no one saw me anymore in any way, except for over the shiny waves of a Zoom screen. I didn't play gigs for people who weren't listening. I wore comfortable pants, and I thought about my sexuality. I wish I could tell you when exactly things changed for me during the course of the pandemic. I can't. But I can give you a few little snippets. I watched an episode of Sex Education, which is an amazing Netflix drama comedy series. I highly recommend if you haven't seen it yet. In it, a character named Ola, a bisexual high school student, a girl, shows up for a date with her boyfriend, Otis, and she's wearing a tux. I was shocked at how much it meant for me to see that on screen. To see a bi woman show up for a date with a man looking queer. It hadn't occurred to me that one could do such a thing. I didn't know that girls who dated men were allowed to wear suits. I watched David Rose, the bisexual character at the center of the show Schitt's Creek, and the straight-ahead normalization of bisexuality that show provided. That meant so much. And I saw my friend Kate post on Facebook about being bisexual. She said coming out as bi has always felt to her like too much and not enough at the same time. That felt so true to me. Gradually, I started to feel more seen. And it helped me see myself better, too. I started wondering what would happen if I chose to make myself more visible. None of these things made me start shouting about bisexuality from the heavens, but taken together, they all added up. And all that alone time as I saw those things added up, too. All that time living and breathing and thinking, without thinking about how other people were looking at me, added up. For so long I had thought, this is true about me, but why should it matter? And what I realized during the pandemic is, this is true about me, and it matters because it's true. It matters because it matters to me. So I started looking for places to bring my circles closer together. I stuck a Bi Pride sticker on my water bottle. Turns out it's a poor quality sticker and it's already faded, so the world of adhesives would like me back in the closet. Instead of just writing songs with female pronouns, I wrote a song that I'll play in a couple minutes about growing up queer in that conservative youth group. I wrote about bisexuality openly on Facebook, and I felt lifted up by the responses and support that I got. And a close friend of mine, a lot of people actually, wrote after they saw that to tell me that they were bi too, and that they felt weird about it. They felt like they didn't know if they should talk about it. I would never have known about that otherwise. And here I am talking to you about this today. It's almost like I'd been swimming in water that was a certain temperature for so long, I forgot I was swimming in it. Until all of a sudden during the pandemic, I touched the air, and I realized what a temperature difference there was. Realizing that difference has been a great gift. And decreasing the difference since then has felt hard. It has often felt like work, and it's felt scary, but it has also felt really, really good. As I said before, not everything private is meant to be out in the open. It's different for everyone. And those two circles of our lives are separate for a reason. We all live inner lives and outer lives. That's the way it should be. But in a perfect world, those two circles wouldn't be farther apart than we want them to be. Not so far apart as to create that sense of dis-ease or to make us feel invisible or misunderstood. So what are the ways in which you wish you were seen more? Maybe there's an experience of grief or abuse or chronic pain or addiction or shame or joy or love that feels invisible to the world that you wish weren't invisible. Maybe there are parts of you that feel hidden. Maybe there are masks you are wearing, besides the literal kind that you would be wearing if we were all in person, maybe, right? That are making it harder to breathe. Maybe there are places you can bring your two circles together just a little more closely. I think for me, this is just one more step in becoming my truest self, a journey that I will be on until I die. This is a big step, but it's neither the beginning nor the end of the process. These circles of mine are always going to be shifting. And for me, the pandemic has been about learning what I already knew and using those lessons to bring those circles just a little bit closer together. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much, Katie. I could feel your authentic self coming through as you spoke to us, and I admire that a great deal. We do have a little time for some comments or some questions if anyone has them, or if you would like to respond to Katie's question about how would you like to be seen more, or how do you keep yourself, your authentic self hidden? So if anyone has a comment, that would be awesome. Are you raising your hand?
I'm raising my hand.
Oh, he's in a hurry to talk to you, Katie.
Katie,
Okay,
you're one of those really precious, special people who make all of us proud to be part of the human race. Thank you so much for sharing.
Oh, thank you.
Cheryl?
Two comments. One, it makes me realize how I may not be listening to others and what their authentic selves are. And maybe they've been trying to tell me, whether that's in my office or in my family. And it's prompted me to have some discussion with some people. The other comment is, as a professional, there's always this need to not show your vulnerability or your authentic self. But I think some of the best providers are the ones that do show the vulnerability and share that they have the faults and make mistakes, just like everybody else. So thank you. That talk was very inspiring. I really appreciated it.
Ron?
Did Kathy have a? Oh, sorry.
I have something, just a comment. I have, this was informative to me because I've struggled with the concern or not understanding why people who are bisexual or homosexual, whatever, have to come out.
Mm-hmm.
What business is it of anyone else's who you're attracted to, who you're with? So that has always been confusing to me. But I think your comments about being seen as you really are, I guess, make that a little more clear for me. So thank you.
Good. Yeah, I think that is one of the most common questions that I encounter in myself and in the world. So I think it, and it's hard to explain. So I'm glad that it helped clarify a little bit.
Ron, did you have a comment?
Yes, I wanted to say that, as Dick said, that I'm proud of the people like you who have shown the way to live authentically to people who are struggling with that. And it applies to so many things, not just sexuality, but marrying a non-Catholic and so many other ways that people feel inferior and pressured to not be their authentic selves. But for some reason, sexuality has so much, is so core to our identity and so threatening to people. I feel ashamed of being part of a society that makes people live inauthentic lives in horrible ways, pretending they're someone they're not, and marrying people that they wouldn't have chosen to marry, and just so much damage has been done. So I'm both inspired and traumatized by where we are, but I really appreciate your insight on your struggle with that.
Thanks, Ron.
Thank you, Ron. So true. Linda?
I want to say that I'm very, very, very proud to be a Unitarian Universalist, where I don't have to say, oh dear, what if somebody guesses?
So true, Linda. Erica?
And
I
it's
just
all-
wanted to say thank you so much for this, and I'm going to once it goes up on the YouTube, I'm going to copy that to two of my grandkids who are gender non-conforming, and I really appreciate what you had to say, and I think they'll find a lot to chew on there.
Well,
Thank you.
Linda, did I cut you off? Did you have more
No,
to
you
say?
didn't cut me off at all. I wanted to have Erica have a chance to speak.
You know, I think growing up, we didn't have an understanding of the complexity of that spectrum, that sexual spectrum. We didn't have an idea. And I think back on it now to friends I had, even in grade school, who knew. I look back now and realize they knew. And depression was evident in their lives. And they didn't have the freedom to speak about it. And that's heartbreaking for me when I think back on that. And I wonder, Katie, when you heard your camp counselor say, I hate the gays, did you have a sense at that time that he was talking about you?
That is a big question for me, actually. I don't want to ascribe, you know, I didn't have a conscious sense. I know that that's the case. And I don't want to, you know, I don't want to look back with glasses that give my, you know, a 12-year-old self more clarity than I really had. But I do think that, I don't know that I would remember that. Like that's what's a really formative story of my life. And I've thought about it so much, and I don't know that it would have hit me so hard if I didn't know on some level that that was me. You know, I think that your heart understands things that your brain didn't understand. And I don't think my brain understood, but I think that my heart understood who I was at that point.
Did you ever go back to camp?
Yeah, I went to that camp every year. I mean, of course not. I haven't been there as an adult, but yeah, I went there every year, and we burned our pop records and you know, all sorts of things to get the devil away.
It's good. Any other comments this morning? Okay, again, Katie, I give you a good round of applause. You helped widen our circle. We all have things we need to continue to learn, and you brought clarity to that for us. So I thank you very much about that. We enjoyed you so much. So thank you.
Thank you.
Now we have the pleasure of going into our closing hymn, which again has been written and will be performed by Katie. It is called Sacristy.
Yeah, and I'll just say, I know this is a hymn, so maybe an introduction isn't appropriate, but this sort of is a fable, I think, about if I had someone in my life when I was growing up who was braver than I was in these ways. And in writing this fable, the song suddenly became like Catholic in a way that I never was. I'm very Baptist by nature, by upbringing, but somehow the imagery became Catholic. So maybe it's an ecumenical song. When the Benedict bells ring, do they make you think of me? You and me inside the sacristy, with the wafers and the wine, my blood pumping like the organ, holding Bibles in our hands. You, the Canaan land, forbidden and fine. When I hear the bells of St. Jude, they sure make me think of you. All the pretty birds that flew
From your mouth into mine, my swallows almost set to singing, sparrows almost took to wing. But if they knew anything, it's that God's eyes were on them all the time. You said the red velvet played with the quarters. Let's take them. We'll build ourselves a house on the hill. We can draw the holy water, water from our own well. In the hollers and the badlands, in the missionary van, you dressed up in your sunburn, and I hid under mine. And in the evenings at the altar, Father taught us how to pray for all the soul sick and the sinners. You grinned at me, you said, that's you and I. And you said the red velvet played with the quarters. Let's take them. We'll build ourselves a house on the hill. We can draw the holy water, water from our own well. When God spoke to Samuel, you think it sounded like the Benedict bells, everyone ringing out cracked and proud and clean. Back then I thought that we were serpents. I thought we brought the flood, thought we turned water into blood. I thought we drank a wicked wine, but really I was an apple. You were a dove, eating manna from above. I guess you knew that all the time. You know the red velvet played with the quarters. I took them. I built myself a house on the hill. Now I'm drawing holy water. So won't you come where the bells are ringing? You'll find me here in my house on the hill. We can draw the holy water, water from our own well, water from our own well, water from our own well.
Thanks.
Katie, a few weeks ago, we had Peter Mayer join us. I know. And he sang Holy Now. And I see some connections between water from your own well, holy water from your own well. Just beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Our closing words today are from Frederick Douglass. If there is no struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom and yet depreciate agitation are those who want crops without plowing the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its many waters. This struggle must be a moral one, or it may be a physical one, or it may be both moral and physical, but it must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. And we will go into Shalom. Wonderful to see all of you.